This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to look at the Samsung Galaxy S4 finally. This is the AT&T version, one of the first reviews you're going to see of the AT&T version, and this one will be available tomorrow. Now, Samsung actually didn't get us this review unit. I don't know what happened. They kind of cut us out of their review program. I think we said too many nice things about the HTC line of smartphones lately, but fortunately we have retail partners, and they got us an actual retail shipping model with final firmware, and we're going to look at it now. So here it is, the Samsung Galaxy S4. Again, this is the AT&T model. You could get it on choice of your carrier. It's going to be available on pretty much every carrier. 5-inch display right here, full HD, 1920 by 1080. Yes, it is a Super AMOLED display. It still has a pentile matrix, but Samsung keeps improving on that, and the subpixel matrix is not so uneven in terms of subpixel size, and honest to God, it looks really sharp. I have not a single complaint about clarity. There's no staircasing on letters. Looks lovely. We'll talk a little bit more about what it does with colors and things, but you know the story with Super AMOLED. You get exaggerated and very vibrant colors, though there are some software adjustments you can make to that. Home button right here. We have our back button and we have our menu buttons flanking here. Pretty hard to see until they light up. There we go. Right now you can see them. Obviously we have the white model here. It's also available in black, and Samsung makes various flip covers for this, which actually replace the removable back panel of the phone and have a flip cover, so you can actually end up with a couple of different colors there. The front face obviously isn't going to change, but the back will. It's still plastic everywhere. It's still slippery. I won't get too snarky about that. That is what it is. That's what Samsung's doing. We hear they're switching over to metal, but for right now, it's plastic. The good thing about their plastic phones, they're pretty darn durable. I mean, you drop them and they bounce instead of cracking. That's pretty nice, and I've owned quite a few over the years, and they really don't scratch up much either. They did a good job with the faux metal on the side here. It looks really very convincing, and that does give it a little bit classier look compared to the Samsung Galaxy S3. As you can see, it's incredibly thin also. This is 0.31 inches. It's really, really, well, superbly thin. And the phone isn't any bigger, really, than the Samsung Galaxy S3 replaces, even though the display has gotten a little bit bigger. This is our volume rocker over here on this side. Headphone jack up top. You just heard the natural organic sound. This thing is full of sound effects, much like other recent Samsung Galaxy products. Over here we got our power button, typical for Samsung. Micro USB port on the bottom. On the back, plastic. There's a little bit of a pattern here. It's still very glossy. It's a visual pattern. It's not a tactile pattern there. A little AT&T branding going on. There's your speaker. Pretty loud. We'll get to hear that. 13 megapixel camera there. Wow, pretty nice. And it actually takes very good shots and has some pretty nice software too. LED flash right here. And on the front face you can see a whole lot more of these little dots right here. We have proximity sensor, we have an IR sensor, we have ambient light sensor, we have a 2 megapixel camera up front there. Lots of features going on. This runs Android OS 4.2.2 Jelly Bean. That is the latest, greatest version. That's kind of neat because we've seen 4.1.2 in most other phones that have been coming out, other than the Nexus phones, of course, which always get the latest software. Minor version difference there, but for you enthusiasts who want the latest OS, at least right now at the moment, you've got it right here. Samsung's TouchWiz UI, as ever, kind of cartoony, kind of out of control. Lots of customizations of the software here everywhere. Flipboard included, as Samsung likes to do, which is pretty popular stuff, not bad. And we've got the multitasking feature right here. See that little pull-out thing right there? Just like on the Galaxy Note 2 smartphone, you can have these guys running side by side. It's also a handy way to quick launch things. Not all applications are supported here. We've got SMomo, we've got Google Talk, we have the YouTube player, Maps. It also likes to tuck itself away. The standard WebKit web browsers on board. Chrome is here, Gallery, your email, Samsung's Chat On, Gmail. And it makes it all pretty easy. So say we go to Gallery. There's our gallery. And say we want to have the internet browser up next. We just drag it and drop it right there. Now if I just tapped on it, it would have switched back and forth. So that's how that works right there. So you can either use it as a multitasking bar for applications, or you can have a side-by-side. So now I've got two apps going at once. Flip it to landscape mode. Still working. Pretty cool stuff there. But wait, there's a million more software features here. And you know, some reviews have picked on Samsung for really overloading the features on here, and some of you are going to say, well, who's going to complain? The more you give me, the better. Do you remember Microsoft Office several years ago when they kept adding 400 features every new release until nobody knew how to actually use the software anymore, and most people didn't need those features? That's why we complain about these things. Some of the features here are useful, some of them not so much. A lot of them kind of sometimes get in the way or can be confusing. For example, there's a neat feature where you can actually use your hand to scroll back and forth, and we'll show you how that works. We'll get into the gallery. And that's neat, but it only works in some applications. Now, that's kind of confusing because when you have a ubiquitous UI way of doing things, like swiping, for example, you expect that to work everywhere. So when you have navigational features that only work in some places, that only serves to confuse most people. But let's take a look at that in action right now and get to gallery. So here we are in our gallery application, and I'm to the side of the phone, but I think we can get this to work. So here we go. I'm swiping back and forth, and it does work. Now, it's kind of neat, or is it kind of a gimmick? It could be handy for those of you who have dirty hands. Maybe you're working in construction or something like that. But given the fact that this doesn't work in every single place, well, you know. A feature I like a whole lot, and we've seen on the Galaxy Note smartphones, is Smart Stay, and it uses the front camera to keep an eye on you, and it doesn't turn off the screen if you're reading. So maybe you're reading and you're reading slowly. As long as your face is still facing this display, it won't turn it off. Cool stuff. There's also another feature, Smart Scrolling they call it, and it tries to watch your face, and when you're moving your head up and down looking at the screen, it will scroll to the next page. Well, after a while you start to feel like one of those bobbleheads or something like that, because it takes a fairly pronounced amount of movement, and in the end, I find it easier to just touch the screen. While we're in the gallery here, let's look at the camera, because camera is really awesome. Here are some shots that I've taken, and there's a whole lot of neat features in the camera, and one of them is using the front and back camera simultaneously. That might sound like a gimmick, but actually, well, it's kind of cool, because when you're taking a photo, maybe you want to show somebody how awesome the Eiffel Tower is. They're thinking about you there, aren't they? So when they actually get to see you superimposed in the picture, it kind of makes it a little bit more personal. And you can see the level of detail and color here, too. 13 megapixel camera. And, you know, after a while, how many megapixels do you need? Probably 8 is fine for most of us, but when it is handy is for using the digital zoom feature. You can zoom in without as much loss of detail. And you can see colors here are nice. Pinks are blooming a little bit. Usually pinks and reds tend to bloom a little bit on digital cameras. Good detail on the leaves and on the rocks right here. Really very impressive stuff. Pretty natural, not too over-sharpened. And here's a photo where I did use digital zoom because this lovely cardinal was on the rock. And you can see it's actually fairly usable. It does have more noise, but I zoomed in 2.5x, which is a pretty healthy amount of digital zoom right there. So it does allow you to capture something reasonably decently you might not otherwise, like, well, a friendly little bird right there. Video quality is also good. I was trying to follow a bird around here, so it's not the most exciting thing to see, but... And you can hear the audio recording is also pretty good. You can hear the chirping. Pretty smooth, pretty natural 1080p video recording. And now we're in the camera application itself. Quick access to the gallery right here. We have our video recording button, we have our still shot button, and we have modes. This is pretty neat stuff right here. You have auto, you have beauty face, we have best photo, multi-shot. There's a sports mode here, sound shot, where it shoots a picture, but it records a little bit of audio at the same time, so a little bit like a video experience, but not. Drama shot, this is pretty cool right here. As you can see, it takes several shots and then puts them together, so as the illustration shows you, that you can catch somebody as they're just flying through the air. Animated photos, some of those, you know, I don't know, animated photo, not too useful. We've got HDR mode right here, eraser, where you can actually take basically multiple shots of something, and then you can remove things that offend you in the picture, like that person who happened to walk through when you were trying to catch a nice shot. And we have night mode here, and then good old auto, where it tries to figure out the best thing for you, and it usually does a fairly good job. Carousel is a little bit hard to control there. And if you want to do one of those picture-in-a-picture shots, you just tap on the icon right there next to the camera switcher icon. And if you want to get to even more settings, well, they're right here. And then you can see we've got all settings, flash control, a couple of basic ones right there that are important, and then we can get to a whole lot more ISO, metering, face detection, burst mode, photo size, and so on. So a lot of settings to play with here, and a very good camera. Now, is it better than the HTC One camera? Aha, you'll have to watch our SmackDown to find out for that one. And now for some size comparisons. Here we have our Galaxy S4 and we have our Galaxy Note 2 5.5-inch display. Obviously, it's going to be bigger, isn't it? Otherwise, they look remarkably similar. Funny thing, they both come from the same company and they're both in the same product line and, you know, pretty much same design language going on right there. And now we have it with its arch rival right here, the HTC One. You see they're about the same size as you would expect. HTC One obviously going to be made of that fancy aluminum stuff. And side by side, both skinny phones. The HTC One starts out real skinny, gets a little thicker in the middle, so not quite as thin as the Galaxy S4, but you're looking at skinny phones either way that are just about identical in size. And lastly, here it is next to the iPhone 5, who has a 4-inch display, so no kidding, it is going to be smaller. Our brightness is not turned up quite so high on the iPhone, so that's why it doesn't look quite as bright, but you can see the difference in the size footprint right there. And in terms of thickness. Now for the rest of the specs, you're probably familiar with this. Everybody's been following the Galaxy S4 pretty closely. Dual band Wi-Fi here, 802.11bgn, also AC. We have Bluetooth 4.0, GPS with GLONASS, and a 1.9 gigahertz Qualcomm Snapdragon 600 quad-core CPU. So that's clocked a little bit higher than other manufacturers' phones with the same CPU in here, but benchmarks other than GL Benchmark have been pretty much in line with, say, the HTC One. Experientially, it feels pretty fast. I know some reviewers complain about lag. Maybe it's because we have a release version here, but so far it hasn't lagged. There's some inertia here to control how fast this moves. That's not really lag per se. You can see it responds just fine to such insane maneuvers as that. Quite responsive, and the usual Samsung TouchWiz thing. We have our apps, and then we have our widgets, and then we have things that we've downloaded as a segregated item to make things a bit quicker for us. And in terms of settings, I like what Samsung does with settings. You see right up here we have quick access to our wireless radios, the sound, and to brightness. That's always useful to have. And I was something which HTC would do, actually put more of this stuff right up at your fingertips. But wait, aha, in the fashion of Samsung, there's more. If you tap that funny little icon there, my lord, look at that. All sorts of other stuff without actually having to go to settings. Isn't that neat? And if we tap that, there's something, just takes us to our notification panel settings for our brightness adjustment. We can do our LED, all that kind of thing. And if we go back to normal view, if you hit the cog, we go to settings. Now this is something you don't see that often. Because Samsung has so many settings, they've actually made it into 4 tabs here instead of the usual linear scrolling thing. The order is pretty much what you're used to, just divided up into sections. So we have all our wireless control here for NFC, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, your cellular data, S-Beam function for Samsung stuff, Samsung DLNA, screen mirroring, keys via Wi-Fi. On my device, here's where you get to your lock screen, your display settings, the LED indicator stuff, call blocking, power saving mode, language, motion and gestures. So here we have air gesture motion, palm motion, all sorts of things to go with. Our air view, which is on, we have voice control. It hasn't been the best in my experience. Accounts right here, where you added your accounts, and more is where they put everything else I couldn't think of a name for in the category. All your other basic stuff right there, and that's what there is. Now as we take a look at all the software that's on here, benchmark applications, obviously I've put on all the AT&T, bloatware, AT&T Drive Mode, Family Map, AT&T Locker, AT&T Navigator, AT&T Smart Wi-Fi. All that's going to be on here. All your standard Google applications as well. We mentioned Flipboard is bundled. Samsung's Chat On, which is basically messaging over Wi-Fi, and that's cross-platform. Pretty neat stuff right there. Standard gallery applications on board. Samsung's Group Play, that's yet another new feature. AT&T's mobile TV is on board. My Files, which is Samsung's web file browser, pretty handy to have. Optical Reader, this one tries to do OCR using the camera, optical character recognition. So if you take a picture of a book page, for example, that could be useful. Play Books and Google Play Magazines. We also obviously have Samsung's Hub on here. They'd love for you to buy and rent content from them. S Memo, for those of you who know the note, you're familiar with that. The only thing that's different here is you're going to be using your finger instead of a digital pen. This does not support the digital pen. And so let's choose a little finger note, let's call it. Not my favorite way to write, but it is better than nothing. And we can add in text here. And you can see that Samsung's custom keyboard here, press and hold to get alternate characters. We've got numbers across the top. I really appreciate that dedicated number row. Like that a lot. And then we have voice input. Couch. And we've just attached a voice memo. We have Samsung's story album here, so you can create your own little treasured albums. Think of it as scrapbooking on steroids. And there's our little album. Ooh. We've got a voice recorder on board. We have Samsung's own video player because they support more formats than the standard gallery application. Polaris Office is also on board for your MS Office compatible documents. And a little nice step up from the HTC One. Here you can actually create documents too. It's not just a viewer for Polaris. So Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, there you go. And we have Samsung's watch on here, which is also on the Samsung Galaxy Note 8.0 tablet we recently reviewed, and that controls your home theater AV gear and provides you with TV listings as well. Of course, the usual YouTube player. Wouldn't be an AT&T phone without Yellow Pages Mobile on board. So that's your app selection right here. Another thing we like about Galaxy phones, for you power users particularly, this is attractive. Here we go. We're going to pull off the wafer-thin back. It really is very thin. And there we have our micro SIM card. No surprise there. Micro SD card slot supports cards up to 64 gigs according to Samsung. It rejected our 64 gig card SanDisk that we've been using in other Android devices. A little bit weird there, so we're going to test that some more. But right now we have a lower capacity card in there. And there's your removable 2600 milliamp battery. So one of the highest capacity batteries in a phone, the Samsung Galaxy Note 2, has even more. Since it's bigger, it can fit that. But it's nice to have the SD card slot and the swappable battery. And that was our speaker grill right here. Battery life so far has been quite good with our AT&T model, and that's with LTE on and active. LTE, just like this big displays, likes to consume a lot of power. With moderate to more than moderate use, obviously when you first get a phone you use it a whole lot more. No trouble making it through the day on the charge, and by that I mean 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night. And that's with streaming some videos for half an hour, playing music with the screen off for an hour, making some calls, hitting the web a lot, got push email turned on. So just like the HTC One, surprisingly good battery life. And I have to say that it's probably the Qualcomm Snapdragon 600 CPU is really just very power efficient. And by the way, for those of you who thought the Nokia Lumia 920 was pretty cool because you could use it with gloves, this has a setting where you can actually use it with gloves as well. So folks who live in cold climates, you're going to like that. In terms of benchmarks and performance, again, experientially it feels quite fast, does everything we want it to do. Did very well on tests. Quadrant 12,276. On Tutu was 24,776. GL Benchmark 2.7 using the Egypt HD 2.5 test. 41 frames per second on and off screen both. Very good. And SunSpider JavaScript test, 826. Lower numbers are better. That's very good. That's right up there with the iPhone 5, which is one of the fastest for that test. One thing to note, though, the back is not metal, obviously, so it doesn't get burningly hot, but it does get quite warm here if you're doing something like playing gaming or doing benchmark tests like we do. We typically do 4 or 5 benchmark test runs at once, and this guy did start to thermal throttle a bit, so keep that in mind. If you're using this, obviously you're not going to be running benchmarks madly like we do, but if you're playing heavy-duty 3D games with this, you might see a little drop in performance if it gets too warm. We actually tossed it in the freezer to let it run some of the benchmarks in a quicker fashion. It also will get warmer if you're playing games while you're charging at the same time. That's true of all phones, not just this guy right here. So if you're having any problems with throttling, unplug it from the charger. One last feature I want to look at, and some people might think this is gimmicky, but actually for me, it's done pretty well, is S-Translator. Now you have to create a Samsung account to use this first, probably because it's sending stuff to their server. not a huge deal, but let's test German. Ich weiß nicht. Exactly correct, and so is the translation. So let's try out Spanish next. Yo quiero. Indeed, it's correct again. And obviously, I'm not a native German or Spanish speaker, and it managed to understand me anyway with my pitiful American accent. And now we'll try something harder, especially because, boy, my Chinese is not very good. It doesn't have traditional Chinese, just simplified Chinese, but that only matters for the characters you get, not for the speaking. Anyway, let's try something. Ni hao. Ha-ha, I got that right too. God, it makes you feel kind of smart, doesn't it? Cool. And lastly, we'll try out French on it. Où est la salle de bain? Well, that is what I said. There you go. So it's batting 4 for 4 on 4 different languages. Call quality on our AT&T version has been lovely, crystal clear, nice and loud. And you can see we have an extremely large dialer here. I think anybody can use that, even jogging to catch an airplane. And the usual shortcuts here for your call logs, your favorites, your contacts. Plays nicely with my car's built-in Bluetooth and with a couple of Motorola headsets that we've tested so far, as well as the Jawbone. And how about data speeds? And this is on AT&T's LTE network, which is quite good in our area, so you can see some phenomenal speeds there. 23.9 megabit per second down, 19 up, 21, 20 for up. You get the idea. It's fast. It does a good job. Of course, it has the mobile hotspot feature too, so you can use this as a wireless high-speed modem for your laptop or your tablet as well. So yeah, it rocks on data. Speaking of data, you get both Chrome and the old WebKit web browser, which is nice. They didn't take advantage of the fact that we have the old WebKit browser here to install Adobe Flash Player, unlike the HTC One. Kind of bummer there, but here it is loading our website. And you can see how nice and colorful it is and how sharp and clear the text is. There's no staircasing, there's no haloing on the text, so they've really done a very good job with this display. Colors are, as always, a little bit exaggerated and better than life. Obviously, they've sold a lot of phones. A lot of people like better than life colors, and everybody's into photoshopping to increase color saturation. But you photo purists may find it a little bit objectionable. There are 3 different color profiles you can choose, and movie mode is actually the most natural, which isn't something I would have expected. But it works just fine for that. Let's see how it looks when we play a video. And we'll test out our 1080p trailer, which will play obviously at native resolution on this, and you can hear the speaker too, which is set to about 2/3 volume right now. Zingier than zingy green there for our intro screen.
We're talking about huge potential for millions of people. Our therapy enables the brain to repair itself.
Speaker's not bad, not superlative, not bad, but display looks nice. Very nice and sharp. Again, and they've done a good job. They've brought down the color temperature a little bit. It's not quite as cold as the Samsung Galaxy S3, so skin tones will look a little bit better, particularly when you're watching movies. They tend to have, well, lots of people, and more lively flesh tones are a good thing. And because we've got everything in the kitchen sink right here, Samsung cares about your health, and they'd like to put out business all those other manufacturers that make health-aware applications. You've got a little application here, and you can see Samsung S Health. It's going to walk you through your health and fitness and tracking how much you eat. And it starts you out by getting some metrics so it can figure out the kind of stuff that it needs to know about you, and then it will walk you through your exercise program. Honestly, I don't find it full-featured enough to be wildly compelling, and there's a lot of great third-party solutions on the market, but there it is. Seeing it on the home screen, it just makes you want to be healthier, doesn't it? And now we're going to try out Real Racing 3. We're going to buy our basic Nissan Silvia. Sorry. Certainly looks nice and sharp, pretty. Let's see how it races. Nice 5-inch display there, looking pretty. Look at those colors, man. They just are super saturated. We've got our rear view mirrors functional. Let's see if we can bump a couple of people out of the race. This is a good race here because there's a lot of cars involved, so it can drop the frame rates on lesser phones. Very smooth. No drop so far. Ooh, missed the inside of my curve. There we go. So it's playing beautifully. Very smooth. Very capable. Certainly a demanding enough game. Looks great. Lots of detail here. Makes it easy to play. No blocky, jaggy rendering here. Definitely nice looking. So how do you pick between today's top smartphones? Well, we're going to have smackdowns aplenty with this guy, believe me. But I can tell you that the Samsung Galaxy S4 really is one of the top picks of the year, right up there with the HTC One, and still for a lot of people, the iPhone 5. So that's the Samsung Galaxy S4, going to be available on every major carrier pretty much, and even some minor carriers. Really nice high-end smartphone, 5-inch display. Attractive looking, sure it's plastic, but it's a nice looking phone. Superbly thin, very fast, lovely display. Nice phone. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Don't forget to visit our website for the full review of the Samsung Galaxy S4 and subscribe to our YouTube channel.